Alright, guys and gals, and guys, welcome to the casa. That's my only Spanish I know. Anyway, what we're going to do is pick up where we left off from, I believe it was, what's today? Thursday, so it had to have been Tuesday, somewhere in there. And that was on page 1143. So guys, this is what's going on so far. Was over at the school today. They're going to try at an earliest, and so I know I posted, I believe, April the 13th as the date that is a target date for them to bring everybody back to the college. But we're talking to the dean today, and they did say that they're going to try the 8th. So just keep posted on Canvas, and I'll keep you guys updated. And if anything changes, I'll let you know. As of right now, it's still the 13th, but they did mention the 8th, so I just want to let you know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this chapter, and it's going to be up to you guys. You guys are going to have to study, read the book. You know what you got to do. You're this close to getting out of here, and I think we can still do it on time, but you're going to have to put maybe some more effort into, and especially Hazmat, from the date the other day when we were going through this chapter. There is a ton of information, and I still have quite a bit of information to give you, but I'm not going to leave you hanging. Through Canvas, you can always email me, whatever you need to do, ask questions. I'm going to be throwing some discussion questions out there, and maybe that'll help you navigate going through this stuff also. So, that said, let's get started. Good thing is I'm not having to yell at you guys, or so I can talk at a normal rate and voice. So I'm not. I was doing lecture today with the CCFD, so didn't feel like doing this tonight, but I'm doing it for you. You're welcome. Here we go. 1143. All right, we're getting into radioactive material containers. So all radioactive materials, RAM, shipments must be packaged and transported according to strict regulations to protect the public, transportation workers, and the environment for potential exposure to radiation. Packaging used to transport radioactive material is determined by activity type, know this, activity type and form of material being shipped. We have to know these 5 basic types of containers listed from least to the greatest. So we're going to start with the least. All right. And from the ones who had taken the state test last year, they did say these were some questions that they did run across. So make sure you are paying attention to this. All right. Accepted. First one, accepted. Make sure you know that it is used to transport of materials, and here's the key part, with limited radioactivity that present no risk to the public or environment. Second one, B, industrial. Container retains and protects contents during normal transportation activities, not identified as such on packages or shipping papers. Contain materials that present, and here's a part, present limited. Now with that, a limited hazard. I'm gonna have to move this. I'm gonna have to, I guess something's up with my, let me fix this real quick. All right, here, doesn't matter. All right, type A. Type A, packages, and this is C. Type A, packages that must demonstrate ability to withstand a series of tests without releasing the contents. Now, on page 1144, figure 2414, make sure you look at those. The way that I understood that one of these test questions operated was they gave you samples like these, the pictures, and it was maybe, and I'm trying to remember this right, it may have been a type A. So it was like these small containers, a type A container, and they were inside another container. But it asked what type of packaging was this. So you needed to know those little containers were type A's, and you needed to know by looking at these examples that they're given on that table. So type A packages must demonstrate ability to withstand a series of tests without releasing its contents. Type B packages must demonstrate ability to withstand tests simulating normal shipping conditions and must also withstand severe accidental conditions without releasing its contents. Type C. Here's a key part to Type C. Make sure you know this. They are rare. Rare packages used for high activity materials, including plutonium, transported by aircraft. So make sure you remember that. They are rare. Pipelines. According to the PHMSA, as of the year of 2015, there are over 2.5 million miles of pipelines in North America. Corpus Christi definitely has a ton of pipelines. They transport a variety of flammable and non-flammable hazardous gases and liquids, including natural gas, propane, hydrogen, crude oil, diesel, gasoline, and more. I'm not going to read all of those. They're usually buried, but may be above ground, especially in cold climates where the ground is often frozen. In some cases, multiple products may be pushed through the same pipeline at the same time or separated by a pipeline pig. Let me explain what a pig is. It's not a big person in the pipeline. What a pig is when they separate, one pipeline can be used to push multiple different products in that same pipeline. It's separated by this, it's a little large device, and this device basically separates those two products. And once it gets to a certain location, they'll retrieve that pig once that product is out. So that is what a pig is called. Hydrocarbons can also, they're more often used, apparently intermingled in these pipelines. Pipelines also come in a variety of sizes and pressures depending on the product and the function of the line. Large natural gas transmission pipelines operate under extreme pressures, while smaller distribution lines operate under lower pressures. Got some examples also. You can look at the tables here. And also, in 160, the petroleum pipeline, it gives you that example that was talking about, the pig, and you have a diesel fuel separated, separates the gasoline and diesel fuel, and there's a pig in the middle of that. Pipeline breaches can be caused by excavation, maybe somebody's digging in an area, corrosion, equipment material joint weld failures, operation areas, natural disasters. So there's different types, and we've had several pipeline ruptures just recently here in the city. Emergency responders can view the transmission pipelines in their area via the National Pipeline Mapping System, and that's available online. Pipeline releases can be violent, particularly if the gases and/or high-pressure transmission lines are involved. Spills and leaks can involve large quantities of product. Most products transported by pipelines are flammable and combustible. Fire control should be always a priority considered at a pipeline incident. Some indications pipeline leaks or ruptures. It could have the visible clouds, liquid spills, hissing, roaring, liquids bubbling. That's something that could happen if you see something bubbling. That's something that we had on the island the other day, and that's how they noticed it, was something was bubbling off to the side. Ruptured natural gas pipeline. Dead vegetation, those sort of things might be a ruptured pipeline. Pipeline markers in the U.S. and Canada. Know this, these are signal words. Pipeline markers in the U.S. and Canada include these particular signal words. Caution, warning, danger. Know that those are signal words representing an increasing level of hazard. Also contain information describing the transportation commodity, the carrier's name, and the emergency telephone number. Now, those are things you also need to know that you might find on a pipeline marker. Wherever there's a pipeline that crosses a road, there will be markers, and there's examples of those markers on page 1147. Establishing good communication and cooperation with pipeline operators before an emergency occurs is an important element of the emergency response preparedness. Pipeline operators are required to provide a wealth of information to emergency responders. Some of these things: location of transmission pipelines, name of the pipeline operator, products carried and their hazards, location of the pipelines, how to contact that pipeline operator, and how to safely respond to a pipeline emergency. So those are some things you definitely need to know. Just making sure, again, location, then the name of the pipeline, that could also, you may find that as the owner. Just remember that might be the owner. How to contact, then that would basically be the contact number of that owner, the shipper, whomever it might be. Products could definitely be the contents. Products could be the contents. Let's go to 18. It's just as many industrial, commercial, and institutional facilities have pipelines carrying everything. 18. No, this is something I just remembered, and you need to know this. Where pipelines cross under the roads, railroads, and waterways, pipeline companies must provide markers. These markers are often the best way to identify the pipeline. Markers must be sufficient numbers along the pipeline. Pipeline markers do not always have the pipeline's exact location, though. Do not assume that a pipeline runs in a perfectly straight line between markers. Vessel cargo carriers. These are marine vessels, which mean they're in the water. Marine vessels transported over 90% of the world's cargo amount is expected to increase in the future. We need to know that hazardous material incidents involving vessels, they can be minor, such as a small spill, can be major, such as contaminating miles of river or coastline waters. And I think we've all kind of remembered some of the incidents that they've had, ships that ran aground. Some of y'all might not have been born back when I believe it was some ships up in Alaska or something that ran aground and did a big oil spill, so that was pretty bad. Statistics on oil spills show most are relatively small, result in part of the operation, such as a loading or unloading. Normal occur in a port or at a chemical terminals, and we definitely have plenty of those here. Vessels that transport hazardous materials include tankers, may transport large quantities of liquid products, often carry different products and segregated tanks. There are 3 tanker types. There are petroleum carriers, transport crude or finished petroleum products, chemical carriers, different type of chemicals, and then there are the liquid flammable gas carriers, and those carry liquefied natural gas, LNG, and liquefied petroleum gas, LPG. And again, we were talking about these tankers and stuff. Just know that most of them are small. It's the large ones that cause more damage, but you do probably have quite often more of the smaller ones. Cargo vessels, 4 vessel types. Bulk carriers, a variety of materials. Some of the things we've talked about: pallets, drums, bags, crates. Container vessels transport cargo in standard intermodal containers. Roll-on, roll-off vessels have large stern and side ramp structures that are lowered to allow the vehicles to be driven on and off a vessel. Barges, typically box-shaped, flat-deck vessels used for transporting cargo. Towing or pushing vessels usually used to move barges because they are not self-propelled. We do have barges that go up and down. We have an international coastline. If you go over the JFK Causeway, right as you get to the end of the JFK Causeway going towards the island, there's a deep channel, and you will see barges going up and down that channel, and that's carrying goods and commodities from closer to deeper South Texas all the way up to the Galveston area and so forth. Some barges, configurations such as floating barracks for military or construction crews, designed as a bulk oil chemical tankers, also can carry liquid natural gas in cylinders. may serve as floating warehouses with hazardous goods, vehicles, or rail cars inside. All right, so for barges, make sure you go over A through D for barges on number 4, A through D. Just know that this is some things that you could find on a barge, anywhere from barracks, again, military, bulk oil, LNG, and also floating warehouses, hazardous goods, vehicles, or rail cars. Make sure you look over that. Unit loading devices, ULDs. You do need to know what these are. They are containers and aircraft pallets used to consolidate air cargo into a single transportable unit. So make sure you definitely know what a ULD is. Designed and shaped to fit into an airplane deck compartment. Hazardous materials may be shipped in a ULD provided they are in accordance with governmental regulations. Intermediate bulk containers, per U.S. Department of Transportation, either rigid or flexible portable packaging designed for mechanical handling. Design standards the U.S., Canada, Mexico are based on United Nations recommendations. And I think I'm not going to go over all these capacities again. We've gone over the capacities for bulk containers already. So you can just remember whenever you do that, it's the same. It's a bulk container. Okay, we're going to move to flexible intermediate bulk containers. Flexible intermediate bulk containers, sometimes called bulk bags, bulk sacks, super sacks, big bags. Flexible collapsible bags or sacks that are used to carry both solid materials and fluids. We're going to move to rigid intermediate bulk containers. I'm on page 1150. Rigid intermediate bulk containers, typically made of steel, aluminum, wood, plastic, often designed to be stacked. They contain both solid materials and liquids. Some liquid containers may look like a smaller version of an intermodal non-pressure tank. Remember the numbers: intermodal non-pressure tank, IM 101, IM 102. Pressure tanks were Spec 51s. Rigid portable tanks may be used to carry liquids, fertilizers, solvents, and other materials. Drums. These are non-bulk, so you can look back over what the capacity for a non-bulk is. Again, we already went over that. Flat-ended, convex-ended cylindrical packaging, metal, fiberglass, plastic, plywood, those sort of materials. May contain a wide variety of hazardous or non-hazardous materials in both liquid and solid form. Drums may have two types of tops: an open head, removable top, and a tight or closed head, non-removable. For drums, make sure you know these two types of tops that you would find on a drum. Make sure you go over that and highlight it. All right, placards and labels. Okay. This is what we need to know. Placards, labels, and markings. U.S., Canada, Mexico, using placarding, labeling, marking systems are used to identify hazmat during transportation. Know that. All three countries use the same source of their systems, which is United Nations Model Regulations. Generally speaking, labels are designed for non-bulk packaging. Placards are designed for bulk packaging. Write that down. Highlight it, whatever you need to do. Labels and placards look similar, and they convey similar information. There are certain unique labels for which there are no equivalent placards. So remember when I gave you the terms the other day, every good firefighter ought to receive cash money. It's the easiest way to remember these classes, and I'm going to go over it. Class 1, explosive. 2, gases. 3, flammable liquids. Then flammable solids. Oxidizing substances, toxic/poisons. Poisons is the same as a toxin. Radioactive, corrosive, and miscellaneous. Miscellaneous just could be a mix of stuff. Those are the 9 classes. You are required to know them, and you need to memorize them. Okay, 4-digit identification numbers. They're called UN numbers. You need to know that. A UN has assigned each hazardous material a unique 4-digit number. It's United Nations UN number. It's often displayed on placards, orange panels, or certain markings and associations with materials being transported in cargo tanks, portable tanks, tank cars, and other containers and packages. Know this, must be displayed on bulk containers in one of 3 ways. In North America, the numbers must be displayed on the following containers: rail tank cars, cargo tank trucks, portable tanks, bulk packagings, Table 1 materials, regardless of the quantity, and certain non-bulk packages, for example, poisonous gases. They must have a placard on them. And you got some examples on 1152. The UN number is that 4-digit number on 1152, the 1090. It is an orange background. You can find it either in orange background or on the placard itself. As you notice on 1152, you have, it classifies it on the very bottom of the placard. A number 3 classifies that. And so if we go back through our classifications, a 3 would be flammable liquids. And it does say flammable. At 1090, and when we move to the ERG, we're going to be able to identify this by looking at that UN number of 1090. You have another one here. They're all classified as hazardous or flammable liquids because they all have 3s, but they have different UN numbers, which means it's a different type flammable liquid. All right, your emergency response guidebook from here on out, the ERG, provides a key to the 4-digit identification numbers, and you must know this in the yellow boarded section. We're going to go over the ERG just a little bit more here in a little bit. In the yellow boarded section, that's where you find the number. If a 4-digit number is identified first, responders can use the ERG to determine the appropriate initial, this is the key thing for the ERG, is the initial response information based on the material involved. The 4-digit identification number will also appear on shipping papers and should match numbers displayed on tank or shipping containers exteriors. Common reference materials such as ERG do not list all 4-digit UN numbers. The ERG does not list any numbers below 1,000. Know that. Okay, placards. I mentioned before the placards will indicate the class number, 1 through 9, and it should be at the bottom of the placard. Shippers provide diamond-shaped colored coded signs on transportation containers to identify the contents. Each hazardous class has a specific placard that identifies the material's hazard class. Material's hazard class is indicated either by its class, number, or name. Placards may be found on bulk packaging, rail cars, cargo tank vehicles, portable tanks. The unit load devices containing hazardous material over 640 cubic feet in capacity, certain non-bulk containers. You may see containers with more than one placard. Indicates more than one hazard or product is present. Unfortunately, improperly marked, unmarked, otherwise illegal shipments are common. So just because the tank is marked, a number on a placard or a certain class on the placard, it may not be 100% correct. So it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. We identify and then we verify. So we would need to verify that that is the product. There are some important facts related to placards. Placards are not required for shipments of infectious substances, other regulated materials for domestic transport only, materials of trade, limited quantities, small quantity packages, And radioactive, know this, radioactive material, white label 1 or yellow label 2. You need to know that. Those don't require the placard. Some private agricultural military vehicles may not have placards. Hazardous class or division number corresponding with primary subsidiary hazard class of material must be displayed in the lower corner of the placard. Know this, dangerous is placard is for mixed loads where transport vehicle contains non-bulk packages with 2 or more categories of different hazardous materials. Need to know that. Other than Class 7 or dangerous placards indicating a text indicating a hazard that is not required. The text may be omitted from oxygen placards only if the specified ID number is displayed. Now, you do have on your figure 24173, there's a different examples of these placards. Now, we kind of went over a little bit at the very top. It has a background color, a hazardous symbol. It is a diamond shape. It does have a class number at the bottom, 4-digit ID number. And that's at the top of the figure on 24. The colors, the placard colors can tell you something. Orange will be an explosive. Yellow, radioactive or an oxidizer or a reactor. Flammable is red. Non-flammable gas is green. Blue, water reactive. And white is a health hazard. Just by the color alone can actually indicate what that might be. And then you have the symbols. The symbols of explosive, oxidizers, radioactive, flammable, non-flammable gas, corrosive, and poisons. You need to make sure that you do definitely look over that. Now, on page 1155, here's something you're going to have to memorize, and you need to know this. The different classes of explosive that you might find. You have one that just says explosive. I'm in the corner. It's the table, and it's the class 1 explosives. You also have a 1.4, 1.5, and the 1.4 is explosives, but you need to know a 1.5 may be a blasting agent, and 1.6 is also explosive. So they all say explosive except for one. That's the 1.5 says blasting agent. Need to know that. If you also notice the other placards from the gases, different types, flammable gas, non-flammable gas, oxygen, but they're all classified too. So it's going to be a gas. Then you've got the flammable liquids, flammable solids. Here's a key thing, flammable solids. Remember this. If you see anything that is candy striped is a flammable solid. Candy striped flammable solid. Oxidizers are usually going to be yellow. Poisons or toxins, that will be 6, usually has the skull and crossbones. Radioactive is pretty self-explanatory, has the propeller type symbol. A corrosive has what looks like somebody broke something and they got, and it could be burning their skin or something. And then miscellaneous is just a white, or basically a white background. Number 9 can have a candy stripe black background with it also. Labels. Labels. Need to know that they provide similar information as a vehicle placard. 3.9-inch square on point diamonds may or may not have written text that identifies the hazardous material with the package. Class 7 radioactive labels must always contain a text. So what we need to know, labels, we definitely need to know the size. We need to know 1 and 2 provide similar information as vehicle placards, and we definitely need to know they are 3.9-inch square on point diamonds, and they may or may not have written text that identifies the hazardous material. So make sure you know 1, 2, 3. Remember, all your lesson plans are on Canvas, so you can follow along. Most labels are for 9 class hazards. Subdivisions are essentially the same as placarding counterpoints. Packages with more than one label may have more than one hazard or product, contain primary label for subsidiary labeling for materials that meet the definition. Cargo aircraft only label is not associated with a particular hazard class, used to indicate materials that cannot be transported on a passenger aircraft. Markings. Descriptive name, identification number, weight, or specification. We need to know that first part, and we also need to know, which is A and B. A, descriptive name, identification number, weight, or specification. B, includes instructions, cautions, or UN marks required on outer packaging of hazardous materials. Need to know that. Hot. Hot means, and this is something you also need to know, is marked for elevated temperatures. Hot means elevated temperatures. First responders must be extremely cautious, avoid being burned. If it says hot, some high temperature materials can ignite flammable combustible materials. DOT defines elevated temperature materials as one that when offered for transportation or transported in bulk packaging has one of the following properties. Know these properties: a liquid phase at temperature at or above 212 degrees, a liquid phase with a flash point at or above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and a solid phase at a temperature at or above 464 degrees Fahrenheit. So make sure you look over those and you know those temperatures, okay? Now on 1158 it gives you some examples of some markings. There are some that have UN numbers or some that are just marked dangerous. So that gives you an example of what you might find. Also in 1159, we're getting ready to go into some of the hazard classes real quick. And I'm going to go straight down to explosives, class 1. I'm on 1159. Right off the bat, if you look over on figure 24-181, remember those placards for explosives. All of them, basically the one with the explosive picture to the 1.4 to the 1.6. Remember, those all say explosives. And the 1.5, don't forget, blasting agent. All right, explosives. They are reactive, any substance or article with a great deal of potential energy that may rapidly expand and release upon activation. May release energy in the form of light, gas, and heat. Some may be specially designed to explode. Explosive placards list both a division number and a compatibility group letter on them. Okay. Typically packaged as solids in individual packages and boxes. Some explosives are liquids, such as binary explosives. Some transportation vehicles are certain storage areas specifically designed for explosives. Primary hazards of explosives are thermal and mechanical. So, blast pressure, shock waves that rapidly release the gas can create a shock wave that travels outward from the center. Shrapnel and fragmentation, small pieces of debris. Let me back up real quick. I'm just going to, these are some things, these primary hazards that we need to know. Forgot to tell you that. So, primary hazards of explosives are thermal and mechanical. Know that. You do need to know what a blast pressure wave is, a shock wave. Make sure you know that. Rapidly release gases. Read that. You need to know it. Shrapnel and fragmentation, small pieces of debris that is thrown from a container. Just know that. That is shrapnel and fragmentation. Now remember, we are dealing with class 1 explosives. Class 1 explosives that we're going over. Seismic effects. Seismic effects Vibration similar to an earthquake. You need to know that, just that first part. Incendiary thermal effects occurs during an explosion when thermal heat energy forms a fireball. So just know those first parts, understand what they are. They are explosive class 1s, but make sure you look over those. Gases. Materials that are in a gaseous state at normal temperature and pressures, transported and stored in pressure containers or cryogenic containers. We're going to get down here to potential hazards. We have to go over these potential hazards for gas. Heat hazards, and you just need to know the first part. Some hazards for potential gases would be a heat hazard, asphyxiation hazards, a cold hazard, mechanical hazards, chemical hazards. Okay? Make sure you know those. You don't have to get too far in depth in them, just know that those are hazards of gases. Okay, class 3, flammable liquids, page 1164. And this is tea, so with nothing in it. Ice, just in case you're wondering. Class 3, flammable liquids and combustible liquids. What's the difference between a flammable and combustible? It's the flash point. Anything below 100 degrees Fahrenheit is considered flammable. Anything above 100 degrees Fahrenheit is considered combustible. You might see that, so just jot it down and remember it. Ignite and burn with relative ease. Know this for flammable liquids. Most hazmat incidents, such as gasoline and diesel fuel spills, involve this particular hazard. So make sure you know that. All flammable and combustible liquids exhibit a variety of degree of toxicity. Some of these materials are transported in liquid containers. The primary hazards, make sure we do know the primary hazards for these, which would be energy, corrosivity, and toxicity. Make sure you know those. They often manifest the following conditions: thermal hazards again, asphyxiation, chemical hazards, mechanical hazards such as ablative, vapors, and environmental hazards. Class 4, flammable solids. Here's some different ones. Make sure on this placard here that we get a good look at these divisions. Remember I told you about the candy stripe for a flammable solid. That's an important thing to know. And also you do have the number for the blue background, dangerous when wet. Okay? A couple of things you need to know about flammable solids. I'm moving on past flammable solids. That's kind of the parts that I really wanted to go over that you need to know. Class 5, oxidizers. 2 divisions. You need to know the 2 divisions. Class 5 is going to be divided into oxidizers, which are typically solids or aqueous solutions. Don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but and organic peroxide. So what you really want to know, 2 divisions, oxidizers and organic peroxides. Those would be considered oxidizers. They do support combustion and they may be explosive. Know that. When confined with fuel, they may burn continuously. So make sure you do know support vigorously. Supported combustion may be explosive and may burn continuously. Those are some important things of oxidizers you need to know, along with the 2 different divisions. Oxidizers may be explosive. Organic peroxides are oxidizers with a specific chemical that make him prone to reactivity. Prone to reactivity. I believe this is the one I told you about that might be that's shock sensitive. I think that might be the organic peroxide. When these materials are involved in an incident, you may need a small amount of heat to start a fire or explosions. So one thing you want to know about this, organic peroxides, it's the first part, chemical composition, make them prone to reactivity. Moving on to poisons. Class 7, poisons. I'm sorry, Class 6. Class 6, poisons. Class 6, poisons or toxins, either or. These usually skull and crossbones on the placards. Class 6 includes poisons, poisonous inhalation hazards, and infectious substances. Poisonous materials are toxins to humans. Avoid contacts with these particular materials. Inhalation hazards are toxic vapors that can be lethal if inhaled. So what you need to know for poison toxins is avoid contact. They are toxic to humans. The inhalation hazard are toxic vapors that can be lethal if inhaled. And also know infectious substances and biohazards are materials that have the potential to cause disease to human or animals. Know that. Moving on to Class 7, radioactive materials. Went over some containers earlier that I told you need to know. Detection cannot be detected with senses. Know that. While Class 7 placards and labels can indicate that radioactive materials are present, without specialized monitoring and detection equipment, it is not possible to determine if a container is actually emitting radiation. Know that. You must have special monitoring devices to know if it's emitting radiation. It's impossible to tell if radiation is involved at an incident such as a terrorist attack with no placards or label. It's kind of one of those, what we were taught was, if it's an unknown, and when in doubt, one of the monitoring pieces of equipment, monitoring devices that we carry in with us would be for radioactive material. Small packages of radioactive material must be labeled on two opposite sides with a distinct warning label. Each of these three label warnings bears the unique trifold symbol for radiation. And you have radioactive white 1, radioactive yellow 2, radioactive yellow 3. Radioactive 1, 2, 3 labels must always contain the following additional information. And that's going to be something that you need to know this term. What is an isotope? So make sure you look up, and it's one of your terms, look up what an isotope is. You need to know that. It'll also show the radiation activity. Number 8, corrosives. Liquid or solid that causes full thickness, destruction to human skin at the site of the contact with a specific period of time, or a liquid that has a severe corrosive rate on steel or aluminum. Can cause fire and explosion if they come in contact with other materials because of their corrosive actions. And we're going down to number 9. Miscellaneous. Miscellaneous are going to be materials that, know this, anesthetic or noxious or other similar property that can cause distraction or discomfort to flight crew members during transportation. Is a hazardous substance or a hazardous waste, is an elevated temperature, could be a marine pollutant. That's anesthetic. Did I say anesthetic? Okay. Thought I did. Maybe, maybe not. No one's here to police us. Miscellaneous dangerous goods will primarily have thermal and chemical hazards. For example, an elevated temperature material may present some thermal hazards. Hazardous waste may present any of the hazards associated with the materials in normal use. So just know Class 9 could be a miscellaneous of hazardous materials. Canadian placards, we're not going to go over Canadian or Mexican placards. So I'm skipping those. You can read through them, but there's really not a whole lot of important material. Just know that there are Canadian placards and there are Mexican placards and labels, but I'm not going to go through that right now. I'm just trying to hit some of the higher points. Other markings and colors. A number of other marking systems, labels, labeling systems, color codes, and signs may indicate the presence of hazardous material. Markings may be found at fixed facilities, pipelines, pipeline systems, or other containers. Other markings may be simple, with the word chlorine stenciled on them, or complicated, which is a site-specific hazard, communication systems using unique combination of labels, placards, emergency contact information. As you notice on page 1175 through 1178, it gives you an example of all of the placards and the classes that you need to remember and go over. Now we're going on to the 704 system, the NFPA 704. This is important. You need to know the NFPA 704 standard system of identification of the hazards of materials for emergency response. Widely recognized method for indicating the presence of hazardous material at commercial, manufacturing, institutional, and here's the key part to this, fixed sites, fixed storage facilities. So this would be a fixed site. Nothing that's transported up and down the road would have a 704. It would be a fixed place. Now, we can add this to our notes. 704 system, it's going to be gives a general hazard and degree of severity. It's going to give you a general hazard and degree of the severity of the material that's in the container or at the site. So make sure you add that. Use of commonly required by local is commonly required by local ordinance for all occupancies that contain hazardous materials. It's designed to alert emergency responders to know this: health, flammability, instability. Health, flammability, instability. It's related to hazards that may present as short-term acute exposures from fire, spill, or similar emergencies. Now here's something we need to know. The rating system is from 0 to 4. 0 to 4, with 0 indicates the minimum hazard, to 4 indicates a severe hazard. So if you see a 0, that means nothing. If you see a 4, then be careful. And it also categorizes into 3 different colors on the actual label itself. Well, it's 4, but 3 of them we're going to be concerned about. 3, there's one that has a blue background. You need to know a blue background is a health hazard. Blue background, health hazard on the 704 diamond. Red is flammability. Yellow is instability, reactivity, the explosion. What you need to know, if I saw a 4 on a health or the blue background, if I saw a 4 on a blue background, I would know that this is something that is severe for a health hazard. But if it said 4 health, 0 flammability, 0 instability, then I'm not worried about it being a flammable or unstable. I'm worried about it being a health. If it's vice, same thing. If it's a 4 flammable, if it's a 1 health and a 2 instability, then I would say, okay, it's a highly flammable. It does have some health hazards because it's a 1, and it does have some instability hazard. It's a 2. So those are the degrees that you're looking at. 4 being worst, 0 being the least. There's a good example on 1130 of the 704 diamond. So make sure you study that and you know that. You will definitely see that again. Special hazards. Special hazards. Know this. The special hazards are located in the 6 o'clock position. 6 o'clock position. That's at the bottom of the diamond. No specific background color, but white. Know that white is most commonly used for the special. Now you need to know these two. These are some special symbols that you might see. The W indicates reactive with water. And then an OX indicates material is an oxidizer. Make sure you know those. Make sure you study the 704. Definitely something that you're going to see, whether it's the finals, whatever test you take. You're going to need to know that. All right, globally harmonized system. U.S. and many other countries have developed globally harmonized systems of classifications. The purpose is to promote common, consistent criteria for classifying chemicals according to their health, physical, and environmental hazards. Encourage use of capability, hazard labels, safety data sheets, key elements. We need to know these key elements. The key elements: uniform classifications of hazardous substance and mixtures, uniform labeling standards. Make sure you know those key elements for the globally harmonized system. Some of these labeling systems could be allocation of label elements, symbols and pictograms, signal words. Here's some signal words again. I've told you before, signal words would be danger, warning. Okay? Make sure you know that. HMIS and other U.S. hazard communication labels and markings. What we need to know on this, need to know, and I'm on page 1181, you do definitely need to know that OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard, that is the HCS, and that requires, need to know this, it requires employers to identify hazards in the workplace, train employees how to recognize these hazards, and ensure all hazard material containers are labeled, tagged, and marked with identity of substance contained along with appropriate hazard warnings. So make sure you know those right there. Moving on. Canadian workplace hazardous materials information system. Like the US HCS, the Canadian Workplace Hazardous Material Information, you need to know that it's going to require hazardous product to be marked and labeled, spells out requirements for the safety data sheets. There are different ways the Canadian employers to meet with the requirements of the WHMIS. Know this also. This is important for the Canadian workplace hazardous material information. This is important. Know these two types of labels most commonly used. You're going to have a supplier label and a workplace label. Supplier label and a workplace label. And both of these will include the product name, the statement that the safety data sheet is available, and other information will vary depending on the type of label. But it definitely will have a supplier label, workplace label. Mexican hazard communication systems requires employers to ensure hazardous chemical substance and workplace are appropriately, adequately labeled. It adopted the NFPA 704. Employers can opt to use alternate systems as long as they comply with objectives, purpose of standards authorized by the Secretary of Labor and Social Welfare. Signs and colors for safety and health authorizes use of the ISO safety symbols. This is important for the Mexican Hazard Communication System. Know this, that the general caution symbols of Mexico are triangular rather than round like those of Canada, or rectangular as typically found in the U.S. So you definitely need to know that those caution symbols are of a different type. CAS numbers. CAS number, chemical abstract service, often calls CAS numbers, or CAS RNs, or CAS with a number symbol. Numerical identifiers assigned to individual chemicals, chemical compounds, polymers, mixtures, alloys may be assigned to biological sequences. I'm trying to see, okay, this is what we need to know. CAS numbers. Definitely, all right, this is what we're going to need to know for CAS numbers, the numerical identifiers assigned to it. Individual chemicals, chemical compounds, polymers, mixtures, alloys, and may be assigned to biological sequence. So that part right there is what you're going to need to know for the CAS numbers. Remember to study that. Military markings. Military markings. U.S. and Canadian military services have their own marking systems for hazardous materials and chemicals, in addition to DOT and TC transportation markings. They're used on fixed facilities, may be seen on military vehicles, but not required. Caution must be exercised. Military placard system is not necessarily uniform, so know that. They are not necessarily uniform. For security reasons, some building areas that store hazardous material may not be marked. So whenever you enter a military facility, that is a federal installation. State laws do not have any jurisdiction over a federal installation. Those are federal laws. Pesticide labels. Pesticides labels. The EPA regulates manufacturers and labeling of pesticides. In accordance with the GHS, pesticide labels in the U.S. and Canada are now included following. We definitely have to know this. We have to know what the EPA number or Canadian PCP number. That is a pesticide label must have. This is the registration number. Must have the registration number. So the EPA number, Canadian PCP number, is the registration number. Must have that. Know that. It also must have a hazardous statement. This phrase is assigned to each category, so a hazardous statement. An example would be that it gives of a hazardous statement would be harmful if swallowed. That is a hazardous statement. So it must have the registration number, must have a hazard statement. It must have a pictogram. That is a symbol inside a diamond that detonates a particular hazard class. It must have, and know this, it must have a precautionary statement. A precautionary statement. Know what a precautionary statement is. It is a recommended measure that should be taken to minimize or prevent adverse effects resulting from exposure to a hazardous product or improper storage or handling of a hazardous product. So make sure you know what a precautionary statement is. And I'm going to add a precautionary statement to this. One would be keep away from children. Keep away from children would be a precautionary statement. Now, real quick, look over on 1186. On 1186 of your page, hate to break the bad news, but you see some military markings. And that's symbol 1, which is mass explosive. Symbol 2, explosive with fragment hazard. Symbol 3, mass fire. And symbol 4, moderate fire. You've got to memorize those. I think those are on the state test. So make sure you look over that and you memorize them. And you know, because what it might be is just the symbol. A military marking, and say a military marking, this is what you see, looks like a stop sign with the 1 on it. You would need to know that is a mass explosive. So make sure you study that. You might see that again. Here's some on 1187. Some of the symbols for some chemical hazards. This is some bad stuff right here. If you see this, definitely go the other way, or make sure you got the proper PPE on. A G-type nerve agents. The G was always, if you see something like sarin or tabarin, something that has a G-type to it, That was those old German nerve agents, bad stuff. The VX nerve agents, mustard type, leukocyte, blistered agents, those things, that's some bad stuff. So just take a look over that. I can't say that it's something you might see on a state test or anything like that, but if you see that and you're out and about during your career, just know that you don't want to touch that or get involved in that unless you have the proper PPE on. Okay, I told you the precautionary statement. Also, some other things would be a product identifier. We're still on, I believe it's pesticide labels. Kind of got off track here. Yes, pesticide labels. We're going to finish this up. Product identifiers. These are names or numbers used on hazardous product label or in safety data sheets. Signal words. Where you said precautionary statements, it must have signal words also. So know those signal words. I kind of gave you a couple. Definitely remember some of the signal words would be warning and danger. Now, there used to be an old, it used to say, and this is something that you might run across, the warning symbol. So for warning, write signal word down, write warning / caution. It may say warning or caution. You need to know that. The other one you need to add is on danger. Danger might be danger or poison. Danger or poison. So warning or caution, those go together. Danger or poison, those go together. So you need to add that to your notes. Those are some things that it must have, signal words. Supplier identification. Under the GHS supplier identification would include names, addresses, and telephone numbers of manufacturers or suppliers of the substance. The APA encourages but does not require telephone contact numbers on pesticide labels. Now, something we want to add is anytime you're dealing with pesticides, try to do whatever you can to contain or confine the runoff. Confine the runoff to an area. Otherwise, we're going to have hazardous material flowing in many different directions. So confine the runoff. You also, for pesticide labels, you may not find a 4-digit ID number or 4-digit UN ID number. There may not be a 4-digit UN ID number, so add that. Other symbols, every facility may have its own symbols and signs and markings. I'm going to go to ISO safety symbols. That is the International Organization of Standard. ISO defines design criteria for international safety signs. So there's examples you have right up there above it of some of the safety signs. Go into the color codes. These color codes can sometimes provide clues to the nature of hazardous material in North America. Pre-incident surveys can assist in identifying color code systems by using local industries. All right, we got to know these color codes. You're going to have to memorize it. Red means danger or stop. Know that. Orange, warning. Orange, warning. Yellow, caution. Green, safety equipment. Blue, safety equipment signage such as required PPE. All right. And a green could be the first aid stations, eye stations, those sort of things might be green. So first aid stations. So make sure you know those colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue. Not just know the colors, but actually know what they are used for. Written resources. We're getting close. We're just about there. A couple more pages. Written resources. Some of the written resources Safety data sheets, inventory records, other facilities documents, signs, marking, container shapes, other labels, transportation incidents, current ERG, other written resources. Let's get into the ERG. It's a guide to aid, know this is something important. It's a guide to aid emergency responders in quickly identifying initial hazmat hazards involving a transportation emergency incident. It's going to allow you to protect yourself and others during initial response phase by avoiding and minimizing the hazards. Isolation and protective distances based on conditions commonly associated with transportation incidents in open area may not be useful when applied to fixed facility locations or urban settings. Helps identify the material's specific or generic hazards, provides basic guidelines on how to protect yourself and the general public during the initial response phase. So this is something that if, every engine company, every ambulance carries an ERG. That would be the initial response phase. Does not address all possible circumstances, primarily designed to use at incidents during highway and railroad. May be limited for a fixed facility. Several ways to locate appropriate initial actions. You can use the identify for the ERG on the guide page. You can identify the 4-digit UN identification number we went over earlier on a placard or shipping papers. Then look them up in the yellow pages. A number is a yellow page. UN numbers, yellow page. Reference name, if you have the name of the material, not the number, but the name of the material, you go to the blue pages. Yellow pages if you have the number. Blue pages if you have the name of the material. Once you find that name and the number of the material, the identifiers, the placards, then you would reference that 3-digit code, and then you would use that table of placards and initial response guide to use the on scene and located in front of the ERG. Reference the container profiles provided in the white pages or front of the book. The responders can also identify the container shapes. So let's get to a page real quick. I don't have the book with me, but this is a skill that we're going to go over, and for right now, it's going to be kind of tough for me to show you by videotaping how to use the ERG. But don't worry, we're going to use the ERG whenever it comes to, so you can get familiar with it whenever we get back. And hopefully that'll be back pretty soon. So let's just get through some stuff you need to know for testing purposes. And I'm not going to try to dig through here and explain stuff. It's just not going to make too much sense. So, again, I'm going to back up. Use the 4-digit ID number. Find the yellow pages. If you have a name and no number, then you can go to the blue pages. Now, once you find using that 4-digit number, you can actually go to the guide page, which is the orange page. And there's going to be a lot of different information it's going to tell you on the orange pages. Okay, white pages. The white pages, let's go over this real quick. The white pages provide instructions using the ERG. So if you never used it, you can read the white pages, and that's where a lot of instructions are. The front section provides shipping documents, how to use the ERG, local emergency telephone numbers like Chemtrec, safety precautions, a hazard classification system, and introduction to the table of markings, labels, and placards. Okay, add this. Use the table of placard guide numbers if no product name or UN number is visible on the placard. Use the table of placards guide number if no product name or UN number is visible on the placards. What that's telling you is in the white pages, you can actually use just the placard itself. if you don't have a UN number or anything like that, or a product name. And what it's going to do is it's going to classify it for you. And it's going to give you a generic number to the guide, which are the orange pages. So it's not going to be exactly like whenever you find the exact chemical because you have the number. It's just going to classify it for you. But at least it's better than nothing. Again, kind of hard to explain to you over this, but just bear with me. Table of marking labels and placards on initial response guide to use on scene. Also has a rail car identification chart, a road trailer identification chart. Again, you just may see the trailer, and you identify the trailer in those white sections, and then it will classify it for you and get you to the orange pages, which are going to tell you your potential hazards and emergency response directions and those sort of things. The back section provides information about the ERG user guide, protective clothing, fire and spill controls, levy precautions, chemical terrorist used, IED, safe standoff distance, and those sort of things. Let's move on to the ERG, the ID, the text, the yellow bordered pages. Okay, yellow bordered pages. We already mentioned that provides you have the 4-digit UN number. You go to the yellow pages. It enables the first responder to identify the guide numbers to consult for substance involved. If this product is on the, whether it's yellow or blue, if it is highlighted in green, know this, if it's highlighted in green, that indicates that the substance release gases are a toxic inhalation hazard. A toxic inhalation hazard. So if you look on 1193, you look up at the top, you've got the yellow pages open. The yellow pages, and you have several that are highlighted and some that are not. If they are highlighted green, there is a green section that we're going to get to that's isolation distance. But the green tells you what you need to know is that is a toxic inhalation hazard. Green. Know that. Remember that. A P, we went over this earlier, polymerizes. If it has a P, it polymerizes, which is a violent reaction that releases great amounts of heat and energy. Remember that. Know that. If you have the name of the chemical, you will go to the blue bordered pages, which is the next symbol over, so the person is now in the blue. Doesn't have a number, but has a name. Provides an index of dangerous goods in alphabetical order, so they are in alphabetical order, by the material name so the first responder can quickly identify. Displays the material's name followed by the assigned 3-digit emergency response guide. So what you first do is you find the name, then you get the 3-digit guide. Then if it's highlighted in green, you're going to know that you got to get to the green pages. But we always have to refer back to the orange pages, and that's going to give us all the information we need as far as maybe what sort of PPE we need to wear and other potential hazards. User needs to be careful when looking up the product because the subtle mistake in spelling can lead to responders to misunderstand the product's behavior. Remember, green, it is a toxic inhalation hazard. If it's a P, it polymerizes. Orange bordered pages. Orange bordered pages. This provides safety recommendations and general hazards information. Compromise of individual guides presented in 2-page format. The left page lists the potential hazards and the public safety information. So we need to know that. Potential hazards and the public safety information. Potential hazards would be, it's either going to be listing fire or health. That would be some of the potential hazards that would be there, fire or health. Now, at the very top of the guide, I'm on page 1194, if you look at the very top of that guide, that number, the 117, is the number that you got out of the blue or the yellow pages. But also, you remember I told you at the top of the book, it classifies it for you. So right here, whatever we're dealing with on page the 117, it is a gas. It's a flammable gas. It classified it for me. Potential hazards. Right hand provides emergency response information. Each guide designed to cover a group of materials that possess similar chemical and toxicological characteristics. The guide title identifies the general hazards of the materials or dangerous goods addressed. Okay, potential hazard section. Know this. Addresses two hazard types under separate headers. It is health or fire explosive hazards. Those are the two types you need to know. Now here's something you need to know. The highest potential hazard is listed first. So you get to the orange pages. You start with the yellow or the blue pages first, you get to the orange pages. You open up the orange page and you see that health is listed first in the potential hazard. That means that this particular material has a higher health hazard than it does fire. And reverse that. If you see fire at the top of the potential hazard section, a fire hazard is going to be more dangerous than a health hazard. Understand? So the highest potential hazard is listed first. You need to know that. Should be consulted first because will assist in making decisions regarding the protections of individuals at the incident. Types of warnings that are found in this section include toxic, highly flammable, and corrosive. Public safety section provides general information regarding immediate isolation and incident site, protective clothing and respiratory protection recommendations, lists suggested evacuation distances for small and large spills. Small and large spills, know this, jot it down somewhere. Anything over 55 gallons is considered a large spill. 55 gallons, large spill. Fire situations such as distance for fragmentation hazards for tanks that may explode. Initial isolation distance within all persons should be considered for evacuation in all directions from a hazmat leak or source. Moving on to protective clothing, it's going to give you the different types of protective clothing. It's going to give you an evacuations section. It's going to give you the emergency response section. So this information is in the orange pages, but we have to get to the orange pages, and to do that, you identify the chemical. It's going to give you a guide number. That guide number gets you to the correct orange page. There is a fire section, there is a spill or leak section, and a first aid information. Okay. I kind of went a little bit fast. Went through some stuff. Let's see, the ERT tables of initiation, hazard, isolation, and protective, the green bordered pages. So let's get to the green border pages. And that starts on page 1197. I'm going to just real quick, let's back up to 1195 real quick. I'm going to show you something at the top of page 1195. The initial isolation distance. What I want you to know is if you notice the isolation zone, that zone, just remember this, is a circular zone. A circular zone. Remember that. Write it down. Green pages, 1197. Table 1, remember this is the highlighted. Blue or yellow section, it was green highlighted, which means it's a toxic inhalation hazard. So we would have to make sure we get to the green section if it is highlighted. And that's going to be the initial isolations and protective action distances. This is going to be listed with the 4-digit UN number. So you would have to use that 4-digit UN number for this particular section. Provides two different types of recommended safe distances. The initial isolation distance, know this, the two types, initial isolation distance and protective action distances. Make sure you know that. Materials that are highlighted in the yellow or blue section, that's the one. This is why you're going to the green section. Provides isolation protection hazards from, know this, both small and large spills. And what I mentioned earlier, 55 gallons or less would be considered a small spill. 55 gallons or more would be considered a large spill. Small spill less than 55, more than 55 large spill. Daytime, nighttime situations. So what you're going to find, it's going to give you isolation distance, whether it's large spill, small spill, day or night. So that kind of, there's times at night where it's a little more humid, chemicals do react a little differently. So that's why it's going to be day or night. I'm just kind of moving through this because a lot of this stuff is, you need to know the green section is an isolation distance highlighted from the orange or the yellow or blue section. But most of this stuff we're going to actually practice in our skills. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to, I know there's quite a bit we're moving through, but don't worry, we'll get back to it. Shipping papers. Shipping papers. Shipping papers are shipments of hazardous material, must be accompanied by shipping papers that describe them. You need to know that. You need to know shipments of hazardous material must be accompanied by shipping papers that describe them. Now, let's talk about some of these shipping papers. I'm going to read them out to you. I don't think they're all in here, so I'm going to give them to you. The bill of lading. A bill of lading will be found on anything that's carried on the highway. Anything carried on the highway is a bill of lading. It will be carried with the driver. Bill of lading, highway, carried with the driver. The air bill. An air bill is carried on an airplane, air bill, and it will be handled by the pilot. That would be considered an air bill. The rail. A railway could be either considered a train's list or consist, and that is carried with the conductor. And then if it's on the water, it can be considered dangerous cargo, manifest, and that would be carried with the captain. So air bill, bill of lading, train's list, or consents, dangerous goods, manifest. One is, of course, they're all for one's water, air, highway, and rail. Those are the shipping papers. Hazardous waste shipments must be accompanied by a uniform hazardous waste manifest document. So we do need to know this. Basic description sequence. You need to know that this is what you'd find. You'd find the identification number. You'd find the proper shipping name. You'd find the hazard class or division of the material. And the packing group. You need to know that. Identification number, proper shipping name, hazard class or division, and a packing group. And that hazard class or division is of the material itself. Okay. Moving on to safety data sheet, or could be material safety data sheet. So if you see SDS or MSDS, it's the same thing. We're just about there. Write this down, add this to it. Must be on site where the hazmat is used or stored. Must be on site where the hazmat is used or stored. Now this, add this, it could be the best information you have on a specific hazmat chemical or product. Could be the best information on a specific chemical or product. It's a detailed information bulletin prepared by the chemicals manufacturers or importers. Provides specific information about that product, and it can be the best information on that product. It's going to give you a lot of good information. Often best sources of information can be acquired from manufacturers of materials, suppliers, or shippers. Emergency response centers such as Chemtrek. Remember we said Chemtrek is a 24-hour hotline that we can call at any given time if we need help with a particular chemical. Now they can't mitigate it for us, but they can give us a lot of information on it. That would be Chemtrek. Sometimes attached to shipping papers, used worldwide. Sections can be used to identify potential hazards such as fire, explosion, and health. Precautions to be taken to protect the responders. Now, the SDS sections. We need to know some of these. The SDS identification is going to identify the chemical and the recommended use. Chemical recommended use, that's the identification. The hazard identification. The hazard identification. That's going to identify the hazards of the chemical, appropriate warning information associated with the hazards. Now I'm going to add this also. It's also going to give you hazard and response information. Hazard and response information. Composition information on ingredients. So it's going to give you, identify the ingredients contained in the product. First aid measures. It's going to give you initial care that should be given to untrained responders. And again, here's another, the firefighting measures, recommendations for firefighters. And that's going to be also hazard and response information also. Accidental release measures. That's going to be appropriate response to spills, leaks. It's going to give handling and storage, and that's going to be safe handling practices. It also gives exposures controls for personnel protection. Physical chemical properties is going to give stability and reactivity. Toxicological information, etological information. So there is a ton of information that this MSDS or SDS is going to give on a specific material. So definitely, if you can get your hands on this, it's going to really help you out. We're going to go to facility documents. Facility documents. Hazardous communication standards require U.S. employers to maintain chemical inventory, usually contain information about locations of materials within a facility. Can be useful tools for identifying containers that may have damage or missing labels and markings. So definitely need to know that containing information about locations of the materials within the facility, and definitely need to know useful to identify containers that may have damage or missing labels and markings, and that would be for facility documents. Electronic technical resources. Many common written resources, references now available in electronic format. The added benefit of search features that allows information to be accessed at a more efficient manner than the print resources. So just know that. Electronic is just another added benefit. We're going to talk about a few of these electronic resources, and some of them we actually already went over, so don't have to go over the whole thing again. I'm on page 1203. A couple of things you do need to know is the computer-aided management of emergency operations, CAMEO. You need to know CAMEO. And this particular is going to be a system of software applications, helps emergency responders develop safe response plans. These are software applications, help develop safe response plans. They can be used to access, store, evaluate information in critical and emergency response. So make sure you look over CAMEO. The next one, Wiser. Wiser. This is another electronic resource. Wiser, Wireless Information System for Emergency Responder. This is going to bring a wide range of information to the hazmat responder to help identify the chemical, the characteristics of the compounds, and health hazard information. So this is another program that we can use to narrow things down, narrow that search down of certain chemicals. Thousands of them out there. Maybe this will help us out. There's a 9/11 toolkit available for Apple devices. Provides a variety of information that may be useful, from hydraulics to EMS, hazmat, quizzes, so forth. And then there's a hazmat, what's called an IQE chart. Never heard of that, but it's available for your Apple or Android device. So if you want to download that and check it out, it's totally up to you. Using resources to transition to planning the incident. After identifying a hazardous material substance, use sources to gather information about its physical and chemical properties. Okay, that ends this chapter. That was a lot. It basically took another hour and a half on top of the 8 hours we did the other day. So a good 9 hours of information. You guys are going to get start working on this, start studying. There's some stuff that may be a little harder for me to go over, especially the ERG, and I'm sorry I can't get over that with you, but hopefully we'll be back together soon. But just go over the stuff, the portions that I've gone over that can be testing purposes. Make sure you know that, and then we'll get to the skill level part at a little bit later date. I'm going to try to work on some discussion questions, and I'll be posting those discussion questions. And then I'm going to be working on Chapter 25 and Chapter 26, and hopefully I can get that uploaded for you. So it's been about an hour and a half. I'm hoping I can get through each of the other two chapters in an hour and a half. I think you can pause it, take a break, whatever you need to do. But I'm hoping I'm helping you out here a little bit. And again, just be prepared. I'll give you plenty of time to study for the exam, which will probably be, I'm not going to say it's going to be this next week or so, but who knows? Never know. So whenever I've decided to post it, I'll give you the heads up. But I'll definitely give you plenty of time to study. Now what I'm going to try to do is upload this to Canvas, and I'm hoping it does this, because if it doesn't, it's an hour and a half of my time that I'm going to have to find another way to get it to you, because I don't feel like redoing it. All right, guys, I'll see you on the next chapter. Take care.